Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 minutes before 8. A lot of you still wanting to talk about the rail strikes. We'll get to those in a moment. But as I've said before, it is A-level day. And as I have said at least once before, these kids might have it a little bit tough this year. So if you've got a teen in your life, cut him or her a bit of extra slack. They might not be getting the grades they put their entire school career in, but it's the first ones with quotes, proper grades. And I put that in quotes as well for the preceding years. Preceding cohorts in 3 years, so give them a lot of love and a bit more slack. But what might we expect later today? Among headlines that there could be a scramble for places. Here's a man who knows. Don't know how much he's going to be able to tell us, though. Education Secretary James Cleverly joins me now. What are we looking at later today, Secretary of State? Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Nick. Well, first of all, you're right to say that these young people getting their results today have had a tough couple of years, and I pay tribute to them and congratulate them on their robustness and resilience. This will be the first set of public exams that they would have sat, and we are toughening up the grading. Ofqual is toughening up the grading to get back to the kind of levels that we saw prior to the pandemic, but they should be optimistic. There are going to be plenty of great places at plenty of great institutions. We expect over half of students to get into their first choice institution, and the majority of students to get into one of the choices on their UCAS application. And if the grades that they get are a little bit less than they were hoping for and expected, not to freak out, not to get too upset by that. There is plenty of great support, and there will be plenty of great courses, probably more this year than previous years.
Do we know
available
what?
To them.
Sorry, Mr. Cleverly. Do we know yet what the percentages of A or A-star grades?
Well, we'll be seeing those. I'm looking at my watch. We'll be seeing those in the not too distant future.
But will they have had a minor adjustment? Can we use language such as minor adjustment?
So we had a plan, and the plan was to get students back into schools to learn, back into exams to be assessed, and for those exam grades to consciously be not quite as generous as they were in previous years. So that plan looks as if it is playing out. So students may get grades slightly lower than their predicted grades, but the other point I would make is that is not unusual. In normal years, only about 20% of students get the predicted grades or better. 80% of students get less than their predicted grades, but they should not get overly concerned about that, because as I say, plenty of great places at plenty of great institutions.
Is this cohort peak generation COVID, Secretary of State?
Well,
in education terms.
To an extent, I think yes. I mean, I've got teenage boys. My eldest son is now at university, but his A-levels were cancelled at relatively short notice. He was that first year through COVID. My younger son, who sits his exams next year, has gone through a degree of disruption, but the school's now largely getting back to normal teaching. So these youngsters, and that's why I congratulate them so highly, these youngsters have been through a really tough and turbulent year, and a couple of years, and they have responded incredibly well. Big thank you to the teaching profession as well. But we are looking to get back, as I say, to pre-pandemic normality with regard to both tuition and the exams. And as I say, there are plenty of great courses at plenty of great institutions, and the majority of students will get onto their first choice course.
But here's another way of looking at it, Secretary of State. Does every pupil, does every child, young person need to go to university?
I'm glad you asked that, Nick. And it's worth remembering, because today is so often dominated by university admissions. It's worth remembering that half, perhaps even slightly over half of young people getting results today will go straight into the world of work, and I wish them all the best as well. I'm wearing, for those of you who are watching as well as listening, I'm wearing my T-level badge.
I thought that was Trust for Leader.
Well, you can interpret it that way. Now, this is about T-levels. And T-levels, there are about 1,000 students this year who will be getting the first ever set of T-levels. That's their technical qualifications, vocationally orientated qualifications, carrying the same status and the equivalent of 3 A-levels. And technical training, vocational training, and employment is, of course, just as important as it is going across to university. And it's about horses for courses. It's about making sure that every young person has a genuine choice of positives whether that be through taking their education further, or going through one of the high-level apprenticeships, or going straight into the world of work. We want to make sure there are credible options for everybody.
All right. Lastly, on the education front, Secretary of State, are you in accord with Claire Marchant, who is, of course, the head of UCAS, with whom we'll be speaking later in the show, by the way, when she says more students should be recruited to universities from Nigeria, Ghana and Vietnam? It might strike my listeners as a little bit weird. We might struggle to get youngsters in from Nuneaton, but we want them from Nigeria. Secretary of State.
I speak to Claire quite regularly. We, the various parts of the education and higher education world speak quite regularly, and I speak with Claire. So I don't know the context quite of that quote. As you know, before stepping into this job, I was in the Foreign Office. Our university sector is globally renowned, and the students that we get from overseas are quite modest in number, but they are an important part of our higher education system. It does a number of things. It gives British students a chance to mix with people internationally, which is great for both. It builds our soft power around the world, which is, as I say, having been a Foreign Office minister, I know how important that is. And of course, it provides a revenue stream for the universities. But the most important element, in my mind, is that the experience that it gives to UK students to mix with people around the world who are stepping into an increasingly globalised and international world, and mixing with students from different backgrounds, both different backgrounds from the UK and internationally, is a really, really good life experience.
All right, last couple of questions. Making you broader points. The Conservative hustings go on. Indeed, I remember I had the privilege of hosting one in Leeds where you actually addressed your membership. But this at a time when inflation is at 10.1%, the highest lift in 4 decades. Wages are down 3%. Fuel bills are moving up by perhaps £3,000. There's a rail strike. Surely enough of these hustings. Why does it take the Conservatives so long? Enough is enough, Mr. Cleverly.
Well, it's worth remembering, just as I'm here in the studio talking about education stuff, government continues. Government does continue. I know Grant Shapps, for example, has been very active and vocal with regard to the plans he wants to bring into place to make sure that the rail unions can't disrupt other workers' lives in the way they are. Nadeem Zahawi's been talking about the assistance we'll give to people through the cost of living, and I'm here talking about education. So government does continue, but we do recognise that these are perhaps even uniquely tough times. Why
does it take 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever it is? Why?
Well, look, I am, I am a former
chairman of the party.
You're
not that long ago, Mr. Cleverly. So why does it take 7 weeks or whatever it is to pick a leader? You could invade Normandy in this time.
This was the system. This is the system that is in place. I do think it's legitimate to look at reviewing that. That's an internal party process rather than a government process. But as I say, government does continue. Ministers are still working.
It's a bad look.
I'm here. Look, it's.
Come on, you're an honest bloke. It's a bad look.
I would have been very, very happy if this whole process was over more quickly. But as I say, one of the people contending for this is a backbencher, not involved in government at all anymore. Liz is the Foreign Secretary, and I know that she's still active on the foreign affairs side of things as well. But yes, of course, we'd like to see this wrapped up quicker, but we are still working nonetheless.
Finally, you served on the London Assembly for a number of years, representing Bexley and Bromley. You also served on the Metropolitan Police Authority. I'm sure you're aware an arrest has been made in the tragic event, so just to warn you. But more broadly, it would appear that London could be heading again to be locked in some wave of knife and gun crime. Secretary of State, what needs to be done? Do you have confidence that the current mayor is doing enough, Secretary of State?
I cannot express how angry I am about the situation with regard to violent crime in London. When Boris was Mayor of London, when I was working with Kit Malthouse, we cracked down really, really, really hard on violent crime, and it came down. It looks like the current mayor has been asleep at the wheel. Those numbers are heading in the wrong direction, and he really does need to get a grip of it.
Grateful for your time. Good luck. Your next year he's taking exams, so we'll talk again next year. James Cleverly, thank you. Education Secretary appearing here on LBC. Where at 8 o'clock the news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and